Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much. I just want to welcome you all to Dungannon Presbyterian Church tonight. I just thank the church for the invitation tonight. This is part of the Poppy Fest, which will take place over Remembrance Weekend. So Rochelle will give you more information on that later on tonight. But this is just the second in a series of lectures, just in connection with the First and Second World War. And my knowledge really is just of the Royal British Legion. I'm very involved in the ceremonial aspect of the Royal British Legion. Just to give you a very brief history of myself, I'm actually chairman of Dungannon Moy branch for another few days. I'm going to stand down next Tuesday after 9 years. Reason standing down, I'm obviously as well Deputy Northern Ireland Parade Marshal. I organise all the larger events in Northern Ireland. So really it's the amount of work. So that's the Irish Guards laying up their colours a few weeks ago in Belfast. I didn't know the photograph was from taken, but it's a very good photograph. So that's what I'm involved in now. Things they got in the Festival of Remembrance, all Northern Ireland stuff, so it's too much. So that's the reason I'm standing down as the local chairman. I've been at the Albert Hall many times as a standard bearer because I've been Deputy Northern Ireland standard bearer quite often over the last 10 years. There are competitions each year, so you see people out with standards, some are good and some are not so good, but there are competitions next year, every year for that position, and it's kind of a pecking order of who's first, right down to who's last, and all the ones that compete. And again, I have a competition tomorrow morning in Cookstown, so I'm back again, probably hopefully the last time, because it is quite a nervous experience when you have about 100 people watching you and looking for every mistake that you make. But that's just a wee bit about me. So I've been to Albert Hall many times. I also attend Whitehall at the Cenotaph, the Parade Marshal. You see it on TV. There's roughly 10,100 veterans parade past the Cenotaph at Whitehall in London on Remembrance Sunday morning. So I'm involved in that for the last number of years, and again back this year again. I have been very unfortunate. I was invited to the funeral of Queen Elizabeth a number of years ago. It was a massive affair. And again at the coronation of King Charles. And if you look closely, you see me, the standard bearer, bottom left of your screen there, myself. That's Parliament Square in London. So I was very fortunate to be invited to those events. Again, they're all-night rehearsals for them. This is 5 o'clock in the morning in London. So we're out all night. Rehearsals and things like that there. Most of us actually standing about before you're told what to do. But that's my kind of history within the Royal British Legion. I'm also, one of the things I look at also is remembrance as one of my main themes. I'm also chairman of the East Throne RUC GC Association. And again, in a couple of weeks' time, we're dedicating a crest in Brackenwood Parish Church in memory of the 37 police officers murdered in the Dungannon, Clogher Valley and Cookstown areas. So I'm very involved in remembrance. And remembrance again is about those who have been killed in the wars past and the present troubles. And just as a general point, I just believe we have a duty as a society to remember those who did grow not old as we grow old, or be wearied by age, or condemned by the years. But I joined the RUC in 1975. On the 13th of July 1975, I went to Londonderry, Victoria Station. And the place was just full of murders, bombs, bomb scares, riots every Thursday when they got their dole check, right through the Sunday evening when the money ran out. So it was an interesting experience. But always wee things that come back to, in Victoria, there was at the entrance of the station, there was one police officer and one soldier. And you had to do guard because you're always afraid of the IRA coming into the station and shooting the place up, and that was the reason, security. But the wee soldier, anyway, I happened to ask him, why did you join the army? And he said it was like this. I was standing in the court in front of the judge in Manchester, and the judge says, recruiting sergeant or prison. So give him a good choice, and he joined the army. He made a man of him. Actually, a lovely young fellow. He was 18 years old. I was 18 years old at the time, but a few weeks later on, I was out in the beat with another colleague, and I heard shooting, and about 50 yards away, we were in a corner, and the IRA had shot 3 soldiers. One of them was being that young, same young man. But Londonderry was a rough place that time, 3 years after Bloody Sunday, and a lot of people were killed in it. The British Legion in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland was created during the backup of very turbulent times, both home and abroad, as well as the vast number of ex-service returning from military duties and struggling to readjust to civilian life. We also had partition in Ireland and all the associated violence. If you look back in the history, many people were killed in the 1920s in Northern Ireland as the border was drawn up and we became Northern Ireland. I know in the First World War, many people joined the British Army from the island of Ireland. Many reasons why they joined, political. A lot of them were broke. It was for the King's shilling, as we talked about. But anyway, the men joined the army for World War I, and the thoughts were generally that the war would be over by Christmas. So, big recruiting drives at that stage, over by Christmas, that wasn't to be. But towards the end of the First World War, the World War ended. Most of the soldiers wanted to get out of Carkey and safely back into civilian lives as soon as possible. And that proved to be a staggering administration charge. There were millions of men taken from their employment in the British Isles and sent over to France for the various soldiers in the various regiments. But so they had to bring back the people who were in key employment jobs first. They felt if they brought them all back at the one time, there'd be economic chaos and mass unemployment. So they were promised land fit for heroes in their return after fighting for king and country. And any demobilisation system had to be both transparent, fair and carried out as soon as possible. So the men that were needed urgently come back to restock the workforce were brought back, and then really it was after your length of service and what your requirement was when you got away from World War I back home again. Millions of men returned home from the war to their homes, their families and girlfriends. So most coped well against all the odds and managed to live reasonably happy and contented lives. Yet many men found themselves alone in a crowd. No one had really defined the nature of combat fatigue or post-traumatic stress disorder in the 1920s, and there's very little psychological help available. It was termed shell shock. Some soldiers back from the front had simply seen too much, experienced too many horrors to go quietly into the tranquility of civilian life. And the collation of symptoms known as shell shock was common, but not commented about in public life at that time. In fact, some were even executed, apparently, on the front, which may have been from shell shock, executed for cowardice. In truth, there'd be no happy ever after for those returning from the Great War. There was no land fit for heroes as promised the British Prime Minister David Lloyd George to create a better Britain for returning soldiers. Not for the British soldiers at any rate. At that stage, the world economy had been severely overstrained. Great Britain found itself chained to enormous national debt. There was a worldwide depression, European countries teetering on the brink of utter collapse. And once again, it was the ordinary individuals that suffered most in the wave after wave of wage cuts, temporary layoffs, redundancies, so economic chaos and mass employment did. Many had joined the army at an early age and no skills to offer employers. Many had life-changing injuries. Veterans throughout Great Britain formed groups to try and help themselves, and there were 4 national organisations of ex-servicemen that established themselves after the First World War. And that's the National Association of Discharged Sailors and Soldiers, the National Federation of Discharged Demobilised Sailors and Soldiers, the Comrades of the Great War, and the Officers Association. Now, different parts of England had the first of those, the National Association. Other parts of England had the British National Federation, and it was just different groupings, one more for the north of England and more for the south of England. But anyway, these organisations provided soup kitchens and rough accommodation for veterans. They found old buildings, fixed them up, made them somewhere that the veterans could stay after their return after 4 years. Wives and girlfriends had moved on with their lives. Many found themselves homeless on return. Many came home with limbs missing, their faces disfigured, blind and terrible mental problems, and marriages did not survive. The amalgamation of these diverse bodies can be attributed largely to two men, Field Marshal Earl Haig and Tom Lister of the Federation of Discharged and Demobilised Sailors and Soldiers. Many names were suggested for a new organisation, and the British Legion was agreed to be formed on the 15th of May 1921 in the mainland of Britain. However, branches were also formed in Ireland. Dungannon branch was formed in February 1923. Moy was similar, however, we cannot locate an exact date of formation. And Lord Haig served as President of the Royal British Legion until his death. But due to the political disruption in Ireland, Ireland was not recognised fully as part of the new British Legion until January 1925. So this year is actually our official centenary. However, we all still think our centenary is 1921, which is proper. But it was under one banner that the British Legion tried to lobby government to help the veterans who had returned, and how the aftermath of remembrance was dealt with. The British Legion was a tri-part organisation which covers the Navy, the Army, and later the Air Force veterans. A royal charter was established which gave British Legion authority to be the national custodians of remembrance for those killed in the Great War, wars and conflicts since. This being the reason that the British Legion carried remembrance each year at the war memorials and other venues. And our core values are remembrance, welfare, poppy appeal and companionship. So the British Legion lobbied employers to offer jobs to veterans first, to find housing for veterans and take them off the streets, to assist in medical aftercare, as there's no national health service. And this was an uphill task as the government was in financial difficulties. Local councils, particularly in England and here, were the main point of contact for these services at the time, and the British Legion did make inroads into help and jobs required for veterans. This continues today to be a well-run system for veterans right through for over the years. The Second World War came and went. Burtons, the tailor Burtons, made army uniforms for the soldiers in the Second World War, and they were persuaded by the British Legion to have the War Office to issue three-piece suit on demob for all veterans. And this was to allow them to have some civilian attire suitable to be presentable on leaving the army and for future job interviews. In the First World War, many veterans had to travel home in their uniform, which was filthy and lice-infested. Where I live just out the road, there always was a story of a man come back after the First World War. I can't remember his name, but I remember speaking when I was small to some of the older hands about. He eventually landed back home in his uniform. His uniform was totally encrusted with mud. It was just like cardboard. He was lice-ridden. He came home, which was great to see, but his mother wouldn't let him into the house until he had a bath. So that's come home in the uniform. That's why it was so important importance to that for the Second World War veterans. But First World War, again, they had to travel home in their uniform and whatever state they were in, and they were just glad to be home, and that was the main thing. Branches of British Legion either flourished or floundered. Some floundered. Moy, close to ourselves, unfortunately apparently floundered, closing in 1931. But it did restart again in October 1951 with a new standard being dedicated, and it flourished until closing again in the 1960s. There's very limited information on the Moy branch, but Moy did amalgamate with Dungannon, becoming Dungannon Moy branch. That's the reason we have a parade in the Moy in the afternoon on Remembrance Sunday each year. The Republic of Ireland had numerous branches at the start. However, we're now down to 8 branches. You see, the veterans in the Republic of Ireland suffered from a Republic of 100 branches. It's down to present 68 branches. That's roughly the lay at the moment. But interesting, there were 3 divisions of military from Ireland, the island of Ireland in the First World War. We all know about the 36th Ulsters Division. There was also the 10th and 16th Irish Divisions. The 36th was mostly Protestant, while the bulk of the 10th and 16th were Roman Catholic. However, they did fight on the same battlegrounds in Europe, Messines, the 36th Ulster Division. The 10th Irish Division fought side by side. The 10th and 16th had more casualties per head during World War I than the Ulster 36th Division. So really, we think about the casualties we have in Northern Ireland, particularly the Battle of the Somme has been one of the main slaughters at the time. But the 10th and the 16th actually took more casualties per head than the 36th Ulster Division. My wife and myself were actually down in Killarney last year. We were at an event in the Church of Ireland in Killarney, and of course I had a down around looking at the long war lists, and you just see names after names of ones that were killed from the south. A lot of people from the south were killed, and it's maybe not acknowledged, certainly not in the south, and maybe not acknowledged by most, how many from the south gave their lives in World War I. And of course, when I say the 10th and 16th are mostly Celtic, there were a lot of Protestants within the 10th and 16th Division as well, and that's the three divisions that there were. But that forms the ethos. It doesn't matter what religion, what colour, what race, when you're in the trenches, all comrades. And this aspect continues today within the Royal British Legion. It is a cross-community organisation with loyalty to our patron, but a member of the royal family, presently King Charles. Dungannon Moy branch has members from both sides of the community. So some people perceive us as sitting on one side of the community. We are a cross-community organisation. But for various reasons, I know certainly most of the branches would have a very, very high Protestant membership. During COVID, people did different things. I did a lot of research into different parts of the Royal British Legion in Dungannon Moy branch, the Dungannon branch, and this was for our own anniversary back there a few years ago. And I did find snippets way back, and I think it's about the 1930s, that at that stage the parade, it was large Remembrance Day parade of veterans. It started off at the Royal School. It went past St Patrick's Chapel and dropped off people at St Patrick's. We then round the town to whatever the various Protestant churches were. And then at that stage, I think it was like Nightingale, there was two bands. When the veterans finished their service at St Patrick's Chapel, then they walked into the square and they all met up again before finishing back at the Royal School. It's just interesting. I don't know when St Patrick's Chapel, when that finished, but it did show that a lot of people from all religions were involved, you know, in the First World War. The British Legion became the Royal British Legion in 1971 on the occasion of its 50th anniversary with the new Royal Charter. And around the 1970s, the veterans from the Second World War were all starting to go, and membership then was offered to any person who supported the aims and principles of the RBL with loyalty to the royal family. So you don't have to be a veteran to be a member. Dungannon Moy branch will have about 40 to 50% non-veterans, and we're all trying to encourage new members, as a lot of present members are elderly. And we ask that members support us by attending Remembrance Sunday and other events, and just assist in the poppy appeal if possible. I'm not out to recruit people tonight, but I do have application forms here if anybody is interested. But one of the things about being a member of the Royal British Legion is that the Albert Hall each year, you probably watched on TV, there are two shows on the Saturday. Certainly for the evening show, you have to be a member of the Royal British Legion. Most of the afternoon show, you also have to be as well. It's really a worthwhile experience in your lifetime of going across, just to feel the atmosphere within the place and just see the pomp and ceremony that's involved. So I've been there a good number of times, so it is a thing that sometimes that if you do want to go, you have to be a member. The demand is so great now that they actually hold one of these ballads now to get over. But that's really the history of the branch and the history. But part of the history of the Royal British Legion is the poppies. And in 1921, the traditional 2-minute silence came in on the 11th of November, and that was established. And the first ever poppy collection was made, raising funds nationally. But it was just shortly after losing a friend in Ypres, a Canadian doctor, Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, was moved to the sight of red poppies growing in the battlefields, and that inspiration led him to write the now famous In Flanders Fields. And this poem inspired an American academic named Maura Michael to adopt the poppy in memory of those who had fallen in the war. And she campaigned to get it adopted as the official symbol of remembrance across the United States and Canada, Australia, and the UK. But at the exact same time, there was a French woman, Anna Guerin, who was in London in 1921, and she had made poppies and planned to sell them. And the first poppies were made from. But Anne Guerin met Earl Haig, and he was persuaded to adopt the poppy as the album in the UK. So the Royal British Legion ordered 9 million poppies and sold them on the 1st of November that year. And this is also an opportunity then to give disabled veterans a job in the production of poppies and wreaths, and that still continues to this day with some veterans involved in Aylesbury, where they make all the wreaths and poppies and all the bits and pieces. Poppies started off, you can see themselves, leaves became an optional extra, and in 1995 the leaf became all part of the poppy. But people complain about poppy, maybe not sure, but wearing a poppy is to show your support for the service and sacrifice of our armed forces, the veterans and their families. It represents all those who lost their lives in active service from the beginning of the First World War right up to present day. It also acknowledges innocent victims, civilians who have lost their lives in conflict and acts of terrorism. So that's the criteria if everybody ever asked you for wearing a poppy. 2024, the Northern Ireland Poppy Appeal came to 1.2 million from Northern Ireland. So branch officers within the remembrance deal with remembrance, the Poppy Appeal, and the welfare of veterans. And just to be clear, because there are people on the internet who come out with bile, could say maybe sometimes about what poppy money does. But poppy money is purely for the benefit of veterans, and none is used to fund wages, expenses of staff, any other expenses. To become a member of the Legion, the membership fee is presently £25, and that £25 pays all the people involved, from the expenses to the paid salaries for staff and all those things. A lot of charities, if you give £1, it might only be 10 or 20p of that pound actually goes to the benefit. The rest is taken off to fund wages. Poppy money is purely for the benefit. 100% of it goes to deal with the benefit of veterans. And the branch membership pays all the rest of the bills. And we have poppy collections each year from the launch of the Poppy Appeal, which is towards the end of October, to Remembrance Sunday. And currently Dungannon Moy branch, we have a 2-week period in Tesco's, 2 days in the Oaks Centre. And we do have great difficulty in sustaining our house-to-house collections, as it's almost impossible to get volunteers for this work. And the biggest problem in the Dungannon area is the amount of foreign nationals now living in the greater Dungannon area. The amount of people who now pay by card or mobile phones, nobody has cash. So to combat this, we have coffee mornings in McGashel on the Saturday before Remembrance Sunday. We have one in Castle Caulfield the previous Saturday to that. And I was out with Moy, and there's a joint effort between the 3 churches, main churches in the Moy, that they're going to have a coffee morning this year at Moy Methodist Church Hall on the 25th of October, starting at 10 o'clock, 10 till 12:30. You also notice around the Dungannon area we have about 25 shops and businesses all year with all year round poppy boxes in them. And this only brings in, it's only pennies and 2p's and things like that, but it still adds up to nearly £2,000 per year. And we only have really Tesco's here as a major store that allows us to collect. A lot of other towns have other stores like Sainsbury's and different ones as well. So that actually helps us, but you do see poppy boxes out all year round. And please, if you put your pennies and 5p's in them, it all adds up. Branch community support. This is all the different parts of the Royal British Legion, and this is the welfare. And now everything gets a fancy name nowadays, and it's branch community support, but it's really welfare within the Royal British Legion. And this is what the Poppy Appeal money goes towards, the paying of bills to help those veterans in need. Most of the issues are mental health, as well as the loss of limbs and other injuries. Many veterans sink in depression. Some are unable to care properly for themselves and their families. Many are entitled to the benefit system, and unable to do so for various reasons. Probably the amount of form filling involved. There are many other reasons. But in Northern Ireland we have veterans who have served in the Falklands, Iraq, Gulf War, Afghanistan, and of course at home here with the UDR. The last of the World War II veterans are nearly all passed away. I was speaking to a number of them recently in relation to another event, and there are only about 4 to 5 World War II veterans left in Northern Ireland, and most of them are around 100, 99, 100, 102, in that age group. We lost the last of our Korean veterans this summer past, so we have no Korean veterans left in Northern Ireland at all. But the branch community support, the welfare system, it's a very confidential and subject to very strict data protection. And again, if I'm asked as chairman or any of our branch members are made known about somebody who has difficulties, we put them in contact with the contact centre and or help them to do so, and then that person is assigned a caseworker who visits and takes the issues involved forward. You all maybe heard about Bennett House. So the higher end of the Royal British Legion is run by a board of trustees. 50% of them are elected people, they're veterans. Another 50% are appointments, and that's normally accountants, business people. And some of them we feel that may not fully understand the ethos of veterans, but there was a cost-cutting exercise which Bennett House was closed, and about 3 care homes, similar care homes in England, were closed as well. But Bennett House wasn't just a holiday home, but it was a place particularly where mental health was dealt with. And there are many people I've spoken to over the years who would say they would have taken their own lives only for this support. Brooke House in County Fermanagh is now engaged to provide these services by the Royal British Legion, and again dealing mostly with mental health issues and injuries. But again, there are some life-changing injuries from the past, and they try and help in that regard. Branch community support funds, it's allocated by England, and there's 1.6 million roughly come into Northern Ireland. So we have a poppy appeal of 1.2 million, it's into the poppy, the general pot, but we receive 1.6 million back from into Northern Ireland, which is actually great that we can do that. It does make up for a lot of shortfalls. There are other organisations who also deal with veterans. You've probably seen them, Help the Heroes and different ones. Maybe at the start they were trying to compete, but really they all get together now and they complement each other about services to veterans. There are different ones, Blesma, Help the Heroes, different things, and they all actually work together and work together well. One number of things as chairman, people have spoken to me and said, why is the British Legion not support some of the legal actions against former soldiers? But the Royal British Legion does not get involved in politics of any description. We cannot support different things. We have to support the rule of law, no matter how disagreeable it may appear to us, but that is the position of the Royal British Legion. But going back to the formation of the Royal British Legion, social clubs were formed at some Legion premises, and this was like-minded people to socialise and speak about their past experiences if they wished to do so. There was an opportunity for officers of each branch and club to pick up on the welfare of veterans and their families. And you will find that veterans find it very difficult to speak about past experiences with their families or the general public. And this brings out a chance to speak with others from a mental health aspect, as each understands the other's issues. But the British Legion recognised at the beginning that the social aspect was very important. However, we had to comply with the licensing laws and other rules. So clubs are run on a commercial basis as a registered club with their own chairman, secretary, treasurer and committee. So the branch and the club are 2 separate identities, however, all part of one organisation. So that is to kind of give you a guide of the different aspects of the Royal British Legion, what it's about. It's just a very rough overview of that part, to give you an idea of what happens in all the different aspects in relation to veterans, care of them, the poppy appeal, and how the Royal British Legion was set up. Royal British Legion Remembrance from 1921, but how did Remembrance start? If you go back to, you're not that old, but if you go back to Roman battles way back thousands of years ago, What happened to bodies of the soldiers that were killed? They were normally put into a funeral pyre and burnt. Maybe no records, that type of thing. And that continued right through generations over the years, right up to probably even the Peninsular Wars in the 1820s, right through the 1800s. There was different conflicts in India and other countries, up to the Boer War. And even in the Boer War, soldiers' bodies were just burned on a funeral pyre, and that was the way things were done. However, during the Boer War, somebody decided we do need some graves. So there are some graves in Africa, South Africa, which are marked with people's names on them. The way that was dealt with at the time, war memorials are in garrison towns. Now, Omagh, Armagh, and Enniskillen are all garrison towns. So the money was raised through the regiments in those garrison towns, with the military, with the help of the public at the time. So that's why you see in Armagh, in the Mall in Armagh and Creighton Centre, you'll see a South African War Memorial. Enniskillen had one as you used to drive into it, but was moved a number of years ago. And again, Omagh is quite close to the proper War Memorial. You'll see a South African War Memorial as well. So that was the idea of war memorials. That's how that came about. But whenever the First World War started, the messages started to come back. People lost members of their family. What they wanted was these remains to be brought back, to be buried back in Britain or back in England, whatever it was. But that was impossible because within a month or so of the British Expeditionary Force going across into France and Belgium, the slaughter started, and there were so many people been killed. Trench warfare started, the shelling started. So it's just so many, the government could not cope. So the government took a decision at that stage that towns would be encouraged to fundraise their own war memorials at the end of the war to remind, people have a place to mourn for their loved one. The landed gentry didn't agree with the government, and they tried to have their own sons' remains brought home, but that was refused by the government. It's just an impossible situation. People here did not understand what was going on in France and Europe at the time. The amount of slaughter, the amount of people being killed, and by shelling. The front line moved, sometimes every month the front line moved by a few hundred yards, but maybe there were graves and things like that, but they were shelled. People were just blown to smithereens, it's the best way you could say. But eventually then, the idea of the unknown soldier been buried in Westminster Abbey, and that idea was thought up within the war itself, but only came to fruition at the end of the First World War. And really, that is a place where people can grieve, that might be their son or husband. Nobody knows who they are, an unknown soldier. But in Dungannon and Moy, war committees were formed at the end of the First World War. And again, a place where the local family could mourn a loved one who was killed in the First World War. And the committees end up supported by the local government. They established war memorials, and again, Dungannon War Memorial was opened on the 11th, or dedicated on the 11th of November 1922 by Lady Ranfurly, and the Moy War Memorial was in place the following year. The responsibility then was taken over by Stormont after all these committees folded. So responsibility then came down to local councils at that stage. Local councils are different in Northern Ireland. Some of the prominent unionist areas, there's no problem, but in this area here, I had particularly problems with Rees getting wrecked at Moy after COVID. I think it was 15 occasions where I was out in the morning galling up Rees and things like that there, and approaches were made to the Mid-Ulster Council, and I see Clemmy here tonight, and thank you, Clemmy, for your help in a lot of this here when I see him. But we approached the Mid-Ulster Council, the various people anyway, and eventually you'll see the railings at Dungannon and Moy were put in place a year or two ago, and this was to stop the destruction of the rees at the War Memorial. The railings were paid for by the council and are very much appreciated because it did stop the rees getting wrecked. As many as a Sunday morning I went out to the Moy and the rees have been rolling down the hill towards the Blackwater and all around the place. Dungannon, some of the mornings there, they were all around the square, down Scotch Street. So, but it was people wrecking them. The railings now, they can't get at them, they're a metre high, and we think we measured that hopefully they'll not be able to climb over them. But that's just a wee point, about war memorials. But the response is with the local council in relation to war memorials. So, sorry, that's Dungannon War Memorial there. When the World War I started, I'm not even sure where that slide is from. It's a typical slide from possibly Passchendaele in the Ypres salient, possibly at the end. But what happened when soldiers were killed? They were either buried just where they were. Sorry, just give me a wee fraction here. This is the type of battlefields with the trenches. That's another battlefield there as well. And you can see they're just mud, quagmires and mud. Field hospital, usually the large churches or cathedrals, that type of buildings or large buildings were taken over as field hospitals. And then outside there, the wounded soldiers were brought. A decision was made in a few seconds by the surgeon, this person going to live or die. And if they were going to die, at that stage they were just taken round the corner and died. And that was just the grim reality of what happened at that time. There's no antibiotics. If you had a stomach wound, you were going to die, really, and that was it. Head injuries as well. You can see in that there, it's just looking at my age, there's about 2 rifles turned upside down, stuck into the ground with their bayonets. That's a soldier's grave in the World War I. What happened was, if somebody died, if it was a field hospital, there was some sort of records kept. A lot of the time, if a man died out on the field, he was buried, his rifle was stuck in, a piece of wood was maybe scribbled on, maybe his name, his service number. That was set down beside it. Of course, then maybe within a week or two, a shell maybe hit that area and obliterated it. Packing cases were written on with some kind of ink. The weather took it off within weeks. Nobody knew who it was, who was buried there. And that's one of the reasons why you have so many unknown soldiers from the First World War. The problem was, if you ever are in Europe, you'll see different parts of the streets in some of the towns. You'll see a brass plaque across the street and it says front line, say maybe August or something, whatever the year was, and it actually gives you the front line of the British front line, of the German front line. A lot of them's only 100 yards apart. But this moves all the time, and the problem is, as it moved, the shelling started, and the shelling in the First World War was just non-stop type of thing. And if people were buried, even in field hospitals, and hit by shells, the whole lot was just obliterated. But anyway, they tried their best. Piece of wood, they wrote a name down, maybe a regiment down, all wore off, and that person then just became an unknown soldier. A guy named Fabian Ware, he was an officer in the British military in the Boer War. He went to join the military again at the start of World War I. He was too old. But being a shrewd person, he got himself into the Red Cross and got an honorary rank of captain in the Red Cross. And he went across and was totally aghast by the way the record keeping was, what was happening. There was no respect in the fact that nobody could be identified, the people that were killed. Field hospitals, again, a lot of them were just a cross and maybe a name written on it, and again, that was wiped out. So he commandeered people out of the Red Cross who were really more for just, for helping out through the Red Cross Association, but he persuaded them to start and take accurate records where people were killed, maybe how they died, where they died, and what date they died on, to try and get some kind of records put together. He ended up accommodating a lot more people, and he went round a lot of the field hospitals in Belgium and northern France. But again, the field hospitals were totally overwhelmed, at that stage. The government was totally incapable of dealing with the amount of soldiers killed at that stage as well. It was just horrendous. That's all you can really say about the opening few years. But Fabian Ware pushed on and pushed on. He started to be able to get field hospitals to keep proper records, having things. So the biggest problem was, if a soldier died, he was buried somewhere like that, no idea who he was after a few weeks after it. Well, so Fabian Ware suggested some kind of form of identification, and that is the forerunner of dog tags you hear them talking about in the army. And you see in these American films, if an American soldier dies, they takes the dog tags off, both of them off the neck and in the film, but really one stays with the remains and one is taken off, and that is to say, who that person is, and it's identification. And if the person is lost, then maybe in a year's time they can be identified again. The government eventually agreed to make dog tags, and they made them from stiff cardboard. Stiff cardboard in some of those conditions that are waterlogged. Stiff cardboard in those conditions there. They were absolutely useless, so he continued to be a thorn in the side of the government, and he actually got dog tags then made from tin. So each soldier 2 dog tags, usually around his neck or something like that there. One was taken off, at least one stayed with the remains. But this is one of the reasons that in the first and opening years of the war, people were buried everywhere. There was no identification of them. That's why you see in the cemeteries an unknown soldier. They just could not be identified. There was no way of doing it at the time. But eventually with Fabian Ware, he was able to get people identified. There were proper records kept. So that's why as the war progressed, then they were able to identify a lot more people towards the end of the war. What are you going to do with all these soldiers in Belgium, northern France? That was one of Fabian Ware's biggest problems. How do we deal with them? And he took it upon himself to go to the French and the Belgian governments and ask for a parcel of land that there could be proper graveyards made. He was a thorn in their side. Fabian Ware was actually a thorn in everybody's side. I think actually took the UK government, but he actually, the French and the Belgian governments, he got them to grant land, which is termed as British land if you go to some of the proper fully British cemeteries, but the land is granted forevermore, basically to allow that the cemeteries could be made and proper cemeteries could be made at that stage. That continued, but Fabian Ware set the things so other countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, America all followed suit, and France and Belgium then had to grant land to all these different countries who come over to fight wars in their end. At this stage, Fabian Ware was still working under the Red Cross. He probably was using a lot of their people and maybe not doing what the Red Cross was supposed to be doing. So he actually, again, was a thorn in the side of the government, and he asked for some kind of an organisation that would deal with the dead from the First World War. And he got his way, and there was an organisation set up, the Imperial War Graves Commission, but it was changed to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission after a few years. But originally it was the Imperial War Graves Commission. And this group was set up with the task, how do we remember? A big thing to deal with really at that stage, how do we remember, and all the different parts of it. An unknown soldier. That's an all grave. Again, that's why some of them are left. That's what you had. First thing, if they knew they had remains of these people in temporary graves, I suppose what you could say. So the gravestone, what do we put on it? So it was agreed, to the disgust of some of the landed gentry, particularly in England, if you were a private and killed in the war, if you were a general killed in the war, you get the exact same headstone size-wise. So everybody got the exact same. It was fair in everybody, whether you're an unknown soldier or whether you knew your name or your regiment. And again, you can see, just looking at closely, a soldier of the Great War, known unto God. Known unto God was put together by the clergy at the time. A soldier of the Great War was just a comment somebody had made, and that was used as the heading on the gravestone. The cross on the gravestone, everybody was presumed to be Christian. Now, if somebody was known to be Jewish, the Star of David was put on, but everybody was presumed to be a Christian ethos at that stage, so everybody got a cross, unless there was known different. So they sorted out the gravestones. Fabian Ware sorted out where they were going to live. Where they were going to be buried. Regimental badges, again, was put onto... Regimental badges were put onto the gravestones as well, if the regiment was known. And you can see a soldier of the Great War, Royal Enniskillen Fusiliers, known unto God. Royal Enniskillen Fusiliers recruited in Enniskillen, County Fermanagh, into this end of Tyrone as well. That actually could be some of them missing from Dungannon. For all you know, you just don't know who they are. But if they could find out a regimental badge, that would have put onto the headstones as well. Part of the problem was when remains were found after a year or 2 years or more, maybe 4 years from the event of the war, all you could find was maybe the remains, plus maybe part of the uniform, the regimental badge, maybe some personal effects, maybe that didn't rot away. So that's why some of the regiments were known. That's why regimental badge was found. Sometimes people were identified through what they had. A lot of soldiers at that time had leather wallets and been really well wrapped up, like waterproof. Some of that survived, but a lot of them were all killed in the shelling, and bodies blown to bits in the shelling. But sorry, my eyes is not going to see that there, but 5 soldiers of the Great War, all in one grave. That's maybe all that was recovered from the people. Maybe just identified those 5 people, maybe killed in one shell or whatever it was, and they're all put into one grave. Sometimes you'll see graves over there in the place with 2 people, 3 names, some of them even the names on them, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. Maybe they were friends. But at the end of the First World War, what they did, Fabian Ware again, they sorted out, now how do we look for bodies? And they set down the whole battlefields were crisscrossed into like 10-yard squares strung out. Proper searches were brought then down, they went down maybe 2 or 3 feet looking for remains. And they brought in a lot of Chinese labourers were brought in to do this task as well as volunteers from the military. A lot of the military actually went back over to Europe again. I spoke earlier on about post-traumatic stress disorder. There is a guilt complex with that, and any of us in medicine certainly know this. The guilt complex is that they're still alive. Their friends and comrades are still in the battlefields. And in Tynecott Cemetery, you will see a row of Chinese headstones to the workers who died during the recovery of bodies. At that stage, disease would have been a major thing, disease on the battlefield. Afterwards, the battles were over. But really, there was an effort to try and find people's remains after the war. A lot of those people went back over to Europe again. Maybe there was nothing left for them in England or here or wherever they came from. They went back over, and the Commonwealth War Graves Commission then became more formalised. They employed gardeners, and a lot of these ex-soldiers actually stayed and became gardeners and involved in the management of the War Graves Commission. But there's some estimates claim there's 100,000 British and Commonwealth bodies never identified. There's 3 major battles at Passchendaele. There's 42,000 bodies never recovered. It's just so many thousands and thousands of remains never found. Passchendaele had one of the heaviest rain for years, and it was an absolute quagmire. A lot of soldiers actually drowned in it. But that Passchendaele is part of the Ypres salient, and that was the main place. That's why their names are all on the Menin Gate, or else a Tyncott Memorial. So I'm just sliding through. Tyncott. Tyncott's not a Belgian name, it's in Belgium. There was a hut on this site, and some of the English soldiers, I think from Northumberland, thought it resembled the homes at their home back home again, and they called it Tyncott, and it actually, that name stuck with it. It's Tyncott Cemetery. It is the biggest war graves cemetery of all the war graves in Belgium or France. It is massive. I have had the privilege of being there at it. So how was that all planned out? Fabian Ware again pushed to have proper remembrance, proper cemeteries made up. It had to be a theme of remembrance run through them. I say that's the biggest one, and part of the theme of remembrance is how do we do it? So they put it out to different architects, and there was a kind of a competition, I suppose, to use that word, of how we do remembrance and how best for these men that were killed. So whenever the bit of land was identified, whether from the Belgian or French government, it was set up. Thousands of bodies were then exhumed from the known field hospitals and the battlefields at the end of the war, and they were all laid to rest in this formal setting you now see at Tyncott. Big issue, what do you do with the missing? How are they recorded? How do you acknowledge them? If the bodies are exhumed, they're either going to be an unknown soldier. If they're known, at least their name could be put onto a gravestone or the regiment. So after much decision, they decided that each cemetery would have a wall, and that wall would list the names. Again, that's the row of graves at Tyncott. It's a massive cemetery. It really should go to it. This is just a photograph of the side, and each part actually has a panel with names on it. You can just see, and that's just one photograph of that there, but you can see the wet wall goes round and keeps going with the names on it. So the decision was, if a person can be found, if a person cannot be identified, their name would go on the wall. If they can be identified, their name would go on the headstone with the regiment. Because so many lay on the ground for maybe up to 3 to 4 years, there was very, very little left of them, and they couldn't be identified, so they went into the grave, but a lot of them never appeared back again. They were either blown to bits in all the shelling of the First World War, the drowning in Lake of Passchendaele, and these different battle scenes. So they reckon that there's still guts of 100,000 people, bodies or remains have never come to light again. Menin Gate, if you ever had a chance to go to the Menin Gate in Ypres, it is absolutely covered inside with names, lists of names. On the outside as well, it's covered with names. Menin Gate actually was the way to the Passchendaele battles and that part of the Ypres salient. The soldiers, there was a stream and a bridge on it, and the soldiers had to actually march over that bridge and head to wherever they were going to in Passchendaele. And it was just because this was the route that everybody took out of Ypres, that's why the Menin Gate was built there. And again, it was the Commonwealth War Graves Commission that designed the Menin Gate. And again, the deal with the running of the Menin Gate, all the names, and it was recently there refurbished there back, I think it was closed for a period last year. And the Ypres Fire Brigade, again, every evening at 8 o'clock, they go out and they do the last post. And if you ever get a chance to go to the Melon Gate, you'll see the last post they played, Clare Valley, and all these different organisations go out and pay their respect to all those who died. And their names are listed on the Melon Gate. But the Melon Gate wasn't big enough. It is a massive gate. It wasn't big enough, so that's why you have the walls here at Tynecut as well. There's just so many missing. That theme continued right through the smaller cemeteries, names and walls, graves. Bodies are still being found. If any of us ever get a chance, the Ministry of Defence's Joint Casualty and Compassionate Centre deal with fallen soldiers. Now, whether they come from the First World War or from recent conflicts like Afghanistan, if you get a chance, look up war detectives on BBC One iPlayer, and they would say themselves, in the last 10 years, and this is a very recent addition to the iPlayer, the last 10 years they have recovered 300 remains from the First World War. And through DNA, they've been able to identify 60 of those soldiers to the delight of their families. The problem now in Belgium and northern France, every time there's building work starts, say for a house, a factory, they're digging into graveyards, they're digging into remains, and it's commonplace over there. Once they start to dig and they find something, then they have to bring in a team to examine that whole area, and they find enough remains. But even 100 years now after the First World War, still 300 recoveries of remains, and able to identify 60, and that's 100 years later. If you're ever in Belgium, you ever notice agriculture in Belgium is nearly only barley and arable crops type of thing. One of the things I happen to wonder, but the farmers there actually only turn over the top 2 inches of soil, just enough to put the seed in to grow the barley or wheat, whatever it is they're growing. They will not dig down deeper because either they'll dig up a bomb, an unexploded bomb, or different metal and different things like that. But one of the things that still dig up are parts of bodies as well. So the farmers there are all very good. They usually find something, it's reported, and then they bring a team in and they get through that to look at it. But that's one of the things they do. The problem is when you're doing foundations for a factory or for houses or anything like that there, you're digging down maybe at least 6 feet sometimes or whatever it might be, you're taking out, and they're still coming across remains all the time. The Ulster Tower, the driveway for that was widened a number of years ago, and they found something like 10 remains, and the drive was only from out here to the back wall. Again, there's just so many remains in the ground over there. Again, the reason for the unknown soldiers just couldn't be identified. There was no records, but at least Fabian Ware took it forward. The architects designed the size of the gravestones, how those have been done. The larger ones, like Tynecut, I'm just bringing it up here. The largest chambers would have a stone of remembrance, and this is known as the War Stone or the Great Stone. This feature is usually only found in the larger cemeteries, designed by Sir Edwin Lutyens. It is carved out of a single piece of stone and inscribed with the words chosen by Rudyard Kipling. Their name liveth forever. Designed to mimic an altar, the stone invokes a religious sentiment to appeal to the multiple faiths and symbolises the sacrifice made during both wars. So that's in graveyards of first year and second year graveyards as well. Also in the large graveyards and the smaller ones is what is called the Cross of Sacrifice. And again, everybody was designed to be, or thought to be, or the Christian ethos at that stage, unless you were otherwise. But this is designed by Sir Reginald Bloomfield, and the stone cross with a downward sword, and reflects the faith of the majority of those commemorated in the cemetery. So really, that's how the architects designed the cemeteries. They're all done the same way. If you go back to Tynecut, the absolute precision, if you ever go out to precision, the way those headstones are all set up, the spaces between them. The gardeners actually planting different countries of the world. The gardeners plant plants that are able to grow there. They have graveyards in Libya. Sorry. Graveyards in Libya and different, like after the North African campaign, things they got there, and they're all done to a great, just really done very well with plants and things like that, and they do still employ a lot of horticultural people to deal with all that end of it. But so, sorry, excuse me. That's how the cemeteries were. All designed in one kind of a way. All the headstones were designed in one way. So what happened to them during the Second World War when the Nazis took over Belgium and Germany and France and these places again? Some of the graveyards when the Nazis came across from Germany and back into Belgium again, they did put graffiti in some of the gravestones, and they did minor damage. Hitler heard about them. Hitler actually sent, you've heard of the Waffen SS. He actually sent the Waffen SS to guard the Canadian memorial at Vimy Ridge. Now, at Vimy Ridge, if you've ever been there, it's a massive big memorial. And what it is Mother Canada weeps for her sons. So, Hitler, any of those memorials that were just not offensive to him, he gave instructions basically that they be left alone, not to be touched, and they should not be touched by anybody, except the Australian memorials. And any of the Australian memorials, they have a Aussie soldier with a bayonet putting it into the German eagle, and that's what they have in a lot of their memorials in their world. And Hitler had them blown up because that was dishonourable to Germany, the German eagle getting bayoneted by an Australian. So if it didn't suit the Germans, they blew them up. But by and large, all those gravestones were left alone. They may have been hit by an odd stray shell, something like that there, but by and large. There is a story how true it is about the start of the Second World War that two Germans urinated actually up against gravestones in one of the British cemeteries. I don't know how true it is, but the officer took great exception to this and executed the two boys. So that's the way it went. But the German army at that stage, you have the proper, well, you had the modern German army and you had the SS. So that's the story. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But Fabian Ware did leave a legacy. He sorted out everything, basically. Him and his team sorted out everything from the gravestones, how these people are going to be remembered, honoured, right across, not only in Belgium or France, but the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. It really honours the memory of those who died in the two world wars, maintains their graves, memorials at 23,000 locations in 150 countries and territories. So that's what they do now. I did the benefit and over there, and quite honestly, in some of the areas around, not that far from Tynecott, every 2 or 3 fields, there's a corner of a field, there's maybe a dozen graves in it, but they're really, really well kept Commonwealth graves. Even over here, people who were injured in the First and even the Second World War, I think it's Collegial Church of Ireland has a fellow Hodge, he died unfortunately from his injuries, but there's a Commonwealth War gravestone, headstone there as well. There are numerous ones around different cemeteries around Northern Ireland, and particularly in England. So really everybody got treated, honoured for their service to their country. Problem in a lot of the countries now, like North Africa, was actually into Libya and the North African campaign. Those governments maybe weren't that kind to the memorials and the graveyards over there. But I think Gaddafi was there. I think since he's away now, they've rectified a lot of these things. But it's a big organisation. Some said maybe it's got too big for his boots now, but only for the guy Fabian Ware. He got this started, the gravestones, how everything was done, and got it sorted, at least so remembrance is going to these places. If you ever get a chance to go over there, if you have a bucket list, some of you know probably have been over there, but if you ever get a bucket list, go to the Melon Gate, go to Tynecut, go to Vimy Ridge, Ulster Tower, Thiefel, and take a look at just the way that the cemeteries are laid out. Absolutely brilliant the way they're done. But that's remembrance. That's us as a country remembering our dead. It really would take your breath away when you see the amount of gravestones that are in these places. But again, wars are started by politicians. The military hierarchy, they protract the war, they start the war. At the end, the Royal British Legion is there to pick up the pieces of the soldiers involved and remember those who died. And again, it's a duty to remember those who were killed in both world wars and all the conflicts since, and remind the families that their loved ones have not been forgotten. But again, it's I find it very interesting just how things were done. I enjoy remembrance. I think we should remember the people that have lost their lives. A lot of police officer colleagues lost their lives that I knew over the years. And it's terrible to think that those people didn't get a chance to grow up and have their own families because of terrorists. The amount of soldiers killed in the 2 world wars. The landed gentry in England lost a quarter of their sons who were the heir to their property. The big houses in England and those type of places. A quarter of the landed gentry lost their sons who were to become heir. That's one of the reasons why after the First World War and into the Second War, a lot of these big houses just crumbled. There was no money, there was no heir to keep it going, no family to keep it going. Between that and Labour's death duties, between the two. But I hope you've enjoyed tonight. I've enjoyed coming here, and again I thank the church very much for inviting me. It's I hope you found it interesting. I find it interesting, to a fair degree, and hope everybody else does as well. And I just want to thank you all for supporting me tonight and for supporting the church. I hope I haven't bored you to tears, but I'll ask Rochelle maybe to come and finish off.
So, David, on behalf of Dungannon Presbyterian Church, I would like to extend our heartfelt thanks for your informative talk on the Royal British Legion and on the Commonwealth war graves, and also for highlighting the importance of us to remember those who have died for us. I also would like to thank Barbara, his wife, for the support she has given to David for tonight, and indeed the 3 daughters. Daughters are very important on occasions like this. Thank you to everyone who has helped prepare for the supper and who has stewarded. Thank you also to Doris and Alan for all of their work. Thank you to Phyllis Williamson again for the lovely poppy arrangement. And I think tonight it is very, very poignant just as we remember the poppy and the significance of it. Thank you to Stephen for all his IT work. And as many of you know, we're hosting a remembrance poppy display here now on the Remembrance Weekend, Sacrifice Remembered. And we would like you all to come back and to support that weekend. It is very much a very poignant weekend and a very poignant display for us. There's lots of leaflets out in the porch, so if you want to take any of those with you, just to widen the circulation of the advertisement of that as well. David's talk and Valerie's talk a few weeks ago has been a lead up to the Poppy Festival, and I think it gives us a little bit more information of actually just what people actually did do so that we can sit here tonight in freedom. We also have 2 events coming up in Moygashel, in Moygashel Hall. Tomorrow morning we have our ladies' breakfast, so if any lady is free and would like to go out to our ladies' coffee morning, Judith Hook will be along to speak. about that. And then maybe more for the gentlemen, on Saturday the 18th of October we're having a vintage vehicle day also out at Magashall Hall, and if you would like to bring your motors along, you'll be very welcome, and there's a barbecue too. Okay. As you notice, we're going through renovations. Going out for your supper this evening, you need to go through the fellowship room and through the creche and into the main hall, because at the moment we're tiling the main hallway into the hall. So we go through that. And if you'd like to give a donation towards our renovation funds and towards the Poppy Appeal, there's little buckets about that we would appreciate your donation. And if you can gift aid does make a difference. As a small token of our gratitude and appreciation, we'd like to present David with a token of our appreciation for all his work and that he has put in for tonight. David, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
But as we leave, as I say, go through the main fellowship area into the creche and into the main hall. And can we just close with prayer and our grace, please? Loving Father, we thank you for this evening we have shared together. We give thanks for David for sharing with us tonight and giving us an insight into the work of the Royal British Legion and the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Thank you for their dedication in honouring those who served and in preserving the memory of sacrifice and service across the generations. We are grateful for all who continue this work today, for their compassion, their commitment, and their reminder to us of the cost of peace and the value of remembrance. And now, Lord, we give thanks for the food we are about to receive, for the hands that have prepared it, and for the nourishment it gives to our bodies and spirits. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. And thank you all for attending. Thank you.
See